Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So we have only gentlemen today. Some ladies are, of course, having the tea outside. I'm sure they'll all walk in soon. So until they walk in, let me take the next few minutes just telling the members what is coming up in the next few days. And I also welcome a lot of people who must be watching, joining this program online today. We understand that it is end of the month and one day prior to Diwali. And of course, the weather is also very conducive to staying home, I think. So, with all this, I think a lot of you are braved to come here today, or I would say dare to come here today, keeping in line with the title of the book, Dare to Lead. So, yeah, as the others walk in after the cup of tea, then we will start. Meanwhile, so the next program, this is the last program for this month, and the next program coming up is on the 4th of November. I would urge you all not to miss this program at all. This is Leading Through Chaos. Opportunities in Global Crisis. Mr. Sujan Shah, he is the Managing Director of BASF Catalysis India Private Limited, and speaks very well, heard him a couple of times, and he's got a very good hold on geopolitics and geoeconomics. So I would urge all of you to come and join us that day, and in case you're not able to come, please do log in online. The next program is on the 6th of November, Navigating the Future, how technovisions are shaping the next decade. This is, we have a panel that day. Mr. Mahesh Ramachandran is the founder and chief mentor of tech innovators. We have Mr. Chandu Nair, who is also entrepreneur and advisor and also a facilitator. And we have Mr. Ram Kumar, who was the past president of MMA and currently the independent director, is also an angel investor. Then the next program is on the 12th of November, and this is about Policing the 21st Century. Once again, a program that we should not miss. Mr. K. Vijay Kumar, IPS, retired. We all know he was the former DGP. He was the head of CRPF, a man known for the arresting the forest brigand Veerappan. He is going to be here on the 12th of November. And this is a program that we do with policy matters. So Mr. Satyamurthy will be joining us. So please do mark your date, 12th of November, and try and be here if possible. Otherwise, it's available online. 18th November, we have the next program that's on strategy, management and innovation in business. Mr. Anil Kumar, he is the founder and CEO of Free Elective LLC, and Mr. C. Shiv Kumar, who is the managing director of RV Industries. They will be talking on the subject strategy, management and innovation. And we have one last program I'll tell you before we start. This is once again a not to be missed event. Mr. G. Satish Reddy, current scientific advisor to Raksha Mantri. He heads the DRDO, former chairman of DRDO, and he's going to talk about emerging technologies in defense. So once again, a great speaker. I'm sure many of you have heard him in the past. Very, very erudite and a very, very knowledgeable person. He's going to talk about the emerging trends in the defense industry. So with this, I think we will move on with the day's program, because we'll also, I know all of you will have to get back on time. So we'll try to also wind up on time so that you all go and continue with your Diwali purchases and preparation. Let me welcome on stage the three guest speakers of this evening. Mr. Sreenivassan Ramaprasad, sir, may I request you to take a place on dais, along with Mr. Rajaram Muthukrishnan and Mr. Rotarian, Mr. PDG.A. Subramaniam, also known as Subbu. Please come. Please come. Let's welcome them with a round of applause, all three of them. Despite the rain and all the cloud burst that we had this afternoon, they braved all that and they are here. Let me briefly introduce all three gentlemen on the stage, and then I'll request Mr. Ramaprasad to take on from there. Mr. Ramaprasad, we are all aware, members of MMA are familiar. He is Director, CADD Centre Training Services, and Asia Pacific's largest CAD training network, operating across 30 countries. He has his master's from BITS Pilani, joined CAD in 1989, played a pivotal role in establishing it as a national brand. He is also the founder of Samarthya. He specializes in people and business training, business skills training. So, a seasoned Rotarian and current president of the Professional Speakers Association of India, Chennai chapter. Thanks, Mr. Ram, for once again moderating this session for us. As you all are aware, Mr. Ramaprasad and Ms. Sangeeta and Mr. Babu, who's here, these are the trio who actually take up this session every month, the Read and Grow session. Then we have the first guest of this evening, considering Ram is also our own, Mr. Rajaram Muthukrishnan. He is the director, Savya Sasy, Software Solutions Private Limited, and it's an IT firm. He is which specializes in EdTech, FinTech, and Analytic Solutions. He is a chartered insurer and an MBA. Started his career with the Indian Consulate in Hong Kong. Later on, serving as Assistant Secretary General of the Indian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. So he's held senior roles in Allianz Insurance and IBM's insurance practice. He brings with him a deep expertise in e-business and insurance technology. Thanks, Mr. Rajaram, for being here this evening. And then we have Rotarian Mr. A. Subramaniam, experienced chemical engineer, entrepreneur, Rotary leader, and a mentor. Also known as Subu very fondly. He is an accomplished engineer with over 50 years of experience in process plant design and manufacturing. After beginning his career in the corporate sector, he founded his own engineering enterprise way back in 1989 and growing it into a global player with turnover exceeding 100 crores as an individual. Deserves a big round of applause, sir. Thank you so much. A dedicated Rotary leader, Subbu has served as a district governor for District 3230 and held numerous roles including district trainer and RA officer. Thank you, Mr. Subbu, for joining us this evening. We are all here, all ears, to listen from all three of you about this great book, Dare to Lead. And may I invite Mr. Sreenivassan Ramaprasad to take it forward from here.
Thank you, Group Captain Venkatraman, for a wonderful introduction and invitation. My heartfelt thanks and gratitude to all of you who are present here this evening, despite a festive time outside and rain, conducive for rains. So really grateful to all of you for being here. And all the online viewers, a warm welcome to all of you for this, what I think will be a very interesting review of a book, Dare to Lead. In fact, we have had several books on leadership. So when I came across this book, Dare to Lead, it was slightly different from the normal leadership model. So the author, Brene had done a lot of research on shame, vulnerability, and leadership, and offers some real good strategies for leaders to inspire connection and drive organizational success. So the summary of the book, I'm going to quickly run through before we get on to the panelist who has got great insights. First, she says leaders should be courageous. Now, if the leaders have to be courageous, they should make themselves open to failure, engage in difficult conversations. And courage is about leaning into discomfort and uncertainty. So when I think about courageous leadership, immediately what came to my mind with the recent context, when India lost to New Zealand, after almost 12 years of success, and I was wondering what Rohit Sharma would have had a conversation with in the team. Would he have really admitted, saying, yeah, I failed to deliver and that's the reason why our team lost to New Zealand? Or he would have defended himself armored. So what the author says is vulnerability is very, very important, and based on that you become more courageous. Okay, that's what came to my mind. Second, daring greatly. Okay, so a leader should be present in any meeting with the wholeheartedness, with a full awareness that, he could be wrong or outcomes could be uncertain. And he should not shield himself from any kind of outcome. Then third one is the rumbling with vulnerability. Okay, this refers to the practice of engaging in tough conversation where people feel exposed to show up honestly. So people are afraid to face the truth, so they try to shield themselves. In the process, leaders most of the time, they fail to be real courageous. They just shield themselves and only show up when the conditions are conducive to them. That's how it is. And living into our values. Author says leaders must clearly identify and act in alignment with their values. So when you think about values, recently we lost one of the greatest leaders of the country, Ratan Tata. I am sure most of you would have felt connected to the person. And why did we get connected? It's simply because of the values he had. And to me, when I think about Ratan Tata, humility, compassion, these are the two things that come to my mind on top of that. And he was following that value throughout, despite all the other successes. So that makes him an outstanding leader. So leaders should align themselves with the core values which they follow. Then author also says, comes up with a new acronym called Braving Trust. Trust is critical to leadership. And Brown introduced an acronym called Braving. Okay, what Braving stands for is boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, which is confidentiality, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Now, this is the acronym for Braving. Leaders need to foster trust within teams by practicing these behaviors consistently. Actually, do we do it? I think the panelists will throw more insights into that. We need to learn to rise. Failure is part of courageous leadership, so we should not be afraid to fail. Brown encourages leaders to embrace failure. She emphasizes the importance of resilience. It's okay to fail, but after failure, you need to come up strong. That's what she says. And she also contrasts armored leadership with courageous, daring leadership. Most of us are armored leaders, which means when there is a tough situation, they shield themselves. They don't really expose themselves. And daring leaders are vulnerable and they're ready to expose. So the key points here, unlike the normal conventional concepts, vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. That's what she emphasizes. Courage comes out of it and it requires practice. Trust is essential, so leaders should foster trust. And tough conversations are not negotiable. You need to have tough conversations for improvement. Resilience and accountability is mandatory. You can fail, but you need to bounce back, and you are accountable for whatever you do. And you should lead with empathy and compassion, because we are dealing with humans, not machines. And finally, the culture and connection is very, very important for the leader. So in summary, Dare to Lead is a call to action for leaders to be brave, embrace vulnerability, and foster trust and empathy within their organization to achieve lasting success. Now, this is the brief summary. Now, I have two fantastic leaders with me. Thanks to both of them. In fact, originally, this program was scheduled on 16th of October, where we were in the middle of a storm. So it was rescheduled to today. This is no different, actually. But still, we dare to review the book on this day. So thanks to both the panelists who quickly agreed to the change of dates and still agreed to come on a date which is not conducive for audience. Thanks for that. They deserve a big applause for that. And both Subbu and Rajaram has been great leaders in their corporate world. Not only a great leaders in the corporate, even in the non-corporate entities, they have been leaders. So we are going to have great insights from both these gentlemen. So I will start off with Subbu, then the same questions applicable to Rajaram also. So my first question is, you are so much used to the traditional leadership models. So how does this vulnerable leadership, which the author tries to share or come out, are you buying that concept, or do you have a different view? So I want you to share with the audience the key points you took away from this book with respect to the conventional leadership and what she advocates. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be here, delighted to be part of it, and thanks to this evening, I got a chance to meet Mr. Rajaram again, so good evening to him also. Well, first and foremost, I am using notes, okay? You must understand that. The reason why I am using my notes is just to make sure that, this book, Ram, is actually very easy to understand. It's also very easy to misunderstand. Because most times, you feel whatever that is being written when you read it, it kind of stays with you. But both Rajaram and I think both of us will agree that in one reading, you just can't really get to the crux of it or what exactly is being said, because completely it's emotional. It's about emotions. And emotions are never easy stuff. It's not straight line stuff at all. It's always goes all over. So vulnerability in the Indian context, Ram, is weakness. Now, embrace vulnerability is what the author is asking us to do. And is that the right thing? Well, if you ask me, yes, it is the right thing. Probably what happens in an Indian context is display of vulnerability is what is missing, or we don't try to display vulnerability. Yes, we are vulnerable. Yes, we will definitely embrace vulnerability and we will do. But it depends upon the situation and where you are. If you're going to be the head of the organization and if you keep displaying vulnerability or showing vulnerability, we all know where it will take us. At the same time, if you are looking at a corporate ladder and you are building a team, and then you are going to have a lot of people who are rising up the ladder, you will definitely want them to display vulnerability so that they can build their teams. And then at the end of it, when you said about this rumbling, or when you are displaying vulnerability and having some straight talk. The second thing that I believe is that displaying vulnerability is not very new. I would much rather ask Rajaram to answer that, because when we were discussing, he explained that so beautifully, so I want him to take care of that. And what was the other question that you asked, Ram? Did you ask for the difference between that and...
Like, does leaders of today have to make a shift towards this, or stay the same way, like the conventional model?
No, I mean, I don't think there is any conventional model in India. See, in India, I believe that most leaders definitely have almost at least 50% emotion in their leadership. So what she is talking about in terms of emotions coming into leadership and, not just being very rational as the Western model is, that's not fully applicable at the Indian context. But I do definitely believe that the one thing that caught my attention as soon as I started reading the book is that leadership is not about winning or losing. It is about having the courage to show up, be there. We have all done it. It's not been put in so many words. I mean, I'm sure many of us who have been in business or even in personal life, like I remember between the 16th and now, I had to go and get a medical report. That was suddenly the doctor had said that please get your PSA tested. Your age is there, this is the time. And he looked at an X-ray and then he said get a PSA test. And I said, oh my God. Now I think he's suspecting something. PSA is any malignancy in the prostate. What's happening? Then the report was supposed to be ready the next day. I didn't go. I said, no, I'm scared to see that report. I was afraid to see that report. I didn't know what was the report going to say. Then the day after that, I did go. I found the courage and went there. That's just an example. The same thing happens. You quote. You're bidding for a very large contract. But then the first thing they say in terms of sales is that you must have the courage to ask for the order. Now, we love to quote, and then that asking for the order is something which is really scary, because that word no, you don't know what will happen. So let me leave it there, Ram. I think we should get Rajaram into it, and so that he can throw some light into that. Definitely.
Yeah, thanks, Subbu. You brought out the importance of courage in your own way, and how much we are afraid to ask, okay? Now let's have Rajaram share his views on this.
Thank you, Ram, and thank you, sir, Subbu, for your wonderful encapsulation of what this book is all about. Ram, I would look at this book from three perspectives. First perspective is the context in which Brene Brown has done her more than 2 decades of research and the kind of data that she has collected on completely qualitative aspects of leadership. And that's something which has not been done as a serious discipline in our country, in our management schools, and that's probably something we should be looking at. Really want to demonstrate higher levels of leadership. That's one good takeaway that I had. The second is the context in which it has been written and the culture for which it has been written. There has to be a contrasting for us. I would say we have to be a Neeraj Shira Viveki in absorbing things from this seemingly simple and highly relatable book. As Subbu mentioned, it's got deep points which internalizes, and a lot of questions are raised in our own way of thinking, etc. Why I say we need to be Neeraj Shira Viveki is we have to be very discerning in accepting some of these things, and also resonating to certain things which are already part of our intrinsic way of life in our country, in our culture. What I mean to say is, there is a contrast between the way the Western system works and the way the Oriental thinking works. I would say even a Japanese or a Chinese would have tough time relating to certain things which they are asking. As he said, vulnerability is seen as a weakness in most of our cultures. They look at the leader to lead, to give decisions, and not falter. However, we in our own history, in our own traditions, we have had leaders like Arjuna fail at the biggest test time, and it requires a Krishna to actually bring him out. And he's appealing and confused emotions that is clouding reason, and he understands the emotion, and Krishna beautifully takes that emotion quotient down and then brings up the reasoning in him and installs. This is there in our tradition. Again, a few contrasting points. As Gurumurti ji always says, right? India is not a land of contracts. India is a land of relationships. India's basic family structure is the basic unit of the society. The Western concept is the individual is the basic unit of the society. The family itself has gone through several mutations, and they really don't have an idea what a family is. And families are not permanent as well. The second thing is, in their corporate world and profession, they make a distinction very clear. It's almost like a wall. Professional life is something, the personal life is something. They don't let each other mix. They don't have work friends coming home. In our culture, in our way of working, the people whom you work with are your lifelong friends. Even after you retire, they are with you. They come, each other's family gets to know. There is no demarcation. So intrinsically, our system has a lot of support for expressing emotions and understanding emotions and dealing with different personality types by force of necessity. There, it is a slightly different context. Becoming so individualistic, becoming so compartmentalized, and in the corporate world becoming very transactional, they cloud their emotions, or they see that expressing themselves in their full is not professional, quote unquote, right? So therefore, this book makes a lot of sense to take them out of the shell, shake them up, and tell that actually being leadership, being a good leader, is to understand how humans work. The very human nature of everything that we do, not just business, but everything that we do is as important as the rational expectations and the drive for productivity, efficiency, and all the modern systems of management that has come. Now, America and the West are rediscovering the fact that people have to be treated as people. And there should be a diversity of opinions. We have always had this Vipra Bauddha Vadanti. That is something they are grasping. That's the context in which this book has been written for them. However, there are, as any American would do, what this person has done is gone through a lot of research, gone and absorbed these aspects, grappled with it, and she has tried to give in a very, very clear, structured manner, how do we deal with these emotions? How do we be human and bring in those human values into the leadership? How do we create, as Ram mentioned in his wonderful summary, how do we create the trust? How do you create those conditions in which frank conversations can happen without political correctness? At the same time, how a leader may not be having all the answers, and he's freely expressing, I don't have all the answers, let's work together and figure out what the answers are. Now, that is something which is very important and probably needs to be brought in, because we as a nation are always confused. What we learn as management practices is all coming from the West. We don't draw something from our own way of thinking and way of life, which the Japanese have wonderfully avoided, and therefore they are very successful. The same has been the case with the Chinese. But the Indian system always tends to look at Western concepts and think if it comes from there, it is something which is very important. We don't give the same importance in our B schools to learn from Viduraniti or a Nyaya Shastra or a Tarka Shastra. We don't even know what these things are. We think we have to read Kotler, we have to read Dunning, these kind of concepts. I'm not saying we should not do that, we should do that, but at the same time, we also have a legacy, and our own theory of management must come up, because in this 25 years, as we go to the Viksit Bharat, we need to come with our own way of looking at things and looking and creating our own management styles, which should also be a benchmark for others to follow. And there are things that India can learn and India can give. That's the balance that we need to do when we look at a book like this. Having said that, I found that the book has some really good methods and tools that she has identified where we can build our ability to have those difficult conversations. How do you create a culture where open communications happen? That's a big drawback in the current Indian system, as Subbu said. We are always hierarchy oriented. We are always taught to look up to the leader. We do not want to question the leader publicly. Even if we have misgivings, we defer to authority, we defer to experience. Whereas what the knowledge economy of today and the future requires ability to be creative. And creativeness comes only if you have curiosity, as she mentions. And curiosity comes only if you have the ability to be agreeing that I don't know the answer, I need to figure out, and let's all figure it out together. These principles are something which we should be able to absorb. The tools and the methods he recommends are something that we can absorb. There is a mind shift that we also have to do as a society, as a culture. At the same time, you will find resonance to a lot of things that has already been practiced in our culture and our way of management. So we intuitively know certain things which they have great length and great labor she has tried to explain, which we intuitively know because we know how a family works. And we approach a family and we approach a business like a family. That's how we actually normally operate. That's my take.
Just a supplement to what Rajaram said. Rajaram, maybe what's happening is that as we move forward in our journey to reach where we have to, India is always very well known for Indian concepts packaged by the Western people and sent back to us. Maybe this is going to be one such that's going to happen. It may be vulnerability will come into the Indian management concept, packed by Brown and then sent here. Thank you.
Thanks for that. In fact, the point was well brought out by you, the fact that our culture has intrinsically have this particular vulnerability built in. So it's already built in, so we don't need to do anything extra, just to reinvent ourselves and do that. Probably that's one reason why most of the global companies are led by Indians. Maybe. Right? Most of the CEOs today, if you look, they're Indians. I think that's a great coincidence with this. Okay, my next question to you is, can you share any real-world examples where you have found leaders embracing vulnerability and they have experienced better outcomes?
I mean, there are two that I can give very quickly. One is, most of us know, but I have experienced it also through very close friends of mine. You know, when the terrorists attacked the Taj Mahal Hotel in Bombay, the way the Tata company and Tata himself responded to the employees was something that, you knew that he didn't have the answers, but then he was there. The next day he was there, he was present, he made sure that every single person believed and felt safe being part of that organization, even for outsiders like us, rank outsiders. At that point in time, what we saw on television, we heard in the news, we saw in the newspapers. But then, imagine these inanimate stuff was sending emotions back to us, saying what kind of an organization, and that is the reason why that organization till today, I would consider internationally as an organization which believes in emotional intelligence, managing emotions, making sure that, because I know a friend of mine who joined, when I joined as a graduate engineer trainee, he joined Tata's as a management trainee. Within 2 years, he said, Subbu, I will retire from the Tatas. I said, hey, how can you say that? He said, no, this organization is like that. I already feel part of it. They made me feel, he was absolutely low down in the accounts department. Just imagine somebody like that saying it at that point in time. I said, man, and I was also in a very large organization. I didn't feel like that. I was just waiting. When am I going to finish my graduate engineering traineeship and get out? I don't want to give the name of the organization, but I did learn a lot. There's no two ways about it. That is number one. Number two is that, when it comes to emotions, knowingly or unknowingly, I didn't read this book. It is a question of how you see your employees. You don't look at them as employees. If you don't look at them as employees and you start treating them as human beings, you suddenly realize that there is a complete change in the way in which they react to you. And I'm fairly certain Rajaram would have had personal experiences. I've had personal experiences. People go through crisis. But many of them don't even say it in our culture. The employee doesn't come up and say that, listen, I'm going through a crisis. Somebody else, it'll come through the grapevine. But if it comes through the grapevine, and if you don't react, then what happens is that, that emotional quotient starts decreasing. Whereas if you do, and without embarrassing, because again, exposing somebody's weakness or somebody's problem in a group is considered weakness in our case. It cannot be done in a group meeting, saying that, hey, I believe your wife is having this, and you're having a problem, and you're finding it difficult for treatment, etc. Can we help you? That, he may not, his first reaction will be, listen, we'll take care of it, kind of thing. So, it has happened more than once in the organization that I had formed. And without being very conscious of being, trying to be very emotionally connected or trying to do the vulnerability area, nothing like that. It was just a constant thing. Maybe having been brought up in a very large joint family, it became automatically. But I have seen that happening. Not to that person who got, the result of what I did, but to the rest of the people. The rest of the people, so much so to say, it's a matter of, I don't want to say it, but we went through terrible times in the company. Terrible times. There have been times when, as an organization, we could not pay for 6 months continuous running, and none of the guys are very rich. They all depend on the salaries. But believe me, not a single person left. That entire team continues to be there working under my son. They're still there. It is just, I thought it was a mutual trust that was built. And yes, I do believe that it has happened. And when it comes to this, I also want to add, it was not as though I am one hell of a God figure in the company or anything like that. I have let go of a lot of people. I've called people and asked them to go home, not had frank talks, etc., which we will come to it, I guess, when you move on. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic, Subbu. I think most of us find it difficult to ask for help when you are in trouble. Yeah, that's also inbuilt in our culture. Now, Rajaram, can we have your real-time examples?
On this point of asking for help, I have a recent and personal experience which I thought I can share here. As you know, we are a small company, about 65 people, a small IT company, started by three of us. The main first founder is my college classmate, and there is one more gentleman and myself. We three were the promoters. And it came to a certain situation where our viewpoints started diverging. My college classmate, who was a founder, had a different vision. He wanted to take the company in a different direction, and we were not able to converge on to staying together. The fundamentals is you should have trust amongst the three of us, and we must have convergence in the direction of the company. And therefore, we thought it is best to demerge and move so that we can pursue each other's vision going forward. Now, that caused a lot of confusion. We have to 20 plus years of working together, therefore, we need to do the demerger, and when it comes to demerger, there is money involved, and when money is involved, certain conversations start happening which you are not comfortable with. And whether we had this doubt whether what we were doing is dharmic or not. And although I have got a lot of corporate experience, I have done far bigger decisions in life in large corporates like IBM or Allianz where I used to work. I felt, and my partner also felt, that we needed somebody independent and outside to work through with us the emotions that we were feeling. The business context is set. We were clear that we have to do it for the growth of the company. We had 50, 60 families to protect, and therefore we wanted to do this, what is good for them. We had a responsibility. But there was an emotion involved. We were, after all, travelers together, and we are going to decide on parting ways, whether we are right, what arguments we are placing, is that correct? So I reached out to three people who were one was a school classmate of mine, another was another colleague in a business networking forum that Ram and me both are involved in, and I had a long sessions with them, 2 to 3 hours. And all three of them gave different perspectives to what I was feeling through, but they gave a conclusion. Their conclusion were all echoing and saying the same thing. Those perspectives, the patient hearing they gave, each session was close to 2 to 3 hours. And I was going through all the emotions openly with them. I was sharing my deepest emotions with them. That was needed for us to get the confidence and then communicate it back into our company. And when we did that to our staff, some of them have grown with our company, and some of them come from very humble backgrounds. Some of my people who are in the staff, who are in the sales staff, the first generation graduate. Mother was a vegetable seller, and he has been with us right through. Today he heads a team of salespeople. He couldn't bear that the three of us are going to part ways. And in that meeting, we explained the business logic, etc., etc. But I knew, when I could see in their eyes, there were so many things that they wanted to ask. I had not read this book, but my instinct told me that I should open them up. And therefore I said, I feel very, very sad about all this. I feel very dejected. Sometimes I feel whether I am doubting whether I am doing the right thing or not. I would also like to know what is your thinking. And then they opened up. Some of them broke down and cried. They couldn't bear to see that, why are we doing this? Can't we stay together? Can't we stay together? But then after that emotional catharsis, they got to understand the reason and they came around. Now, I wouldn't have been able to do that activity if I had not gone through that catharsis myself. So that's where the vulnerability aspect, and how, without knowing this book, I had myself gone through that very recently, and it's a very personal experience of mine.
It's a real practical example you shared, and I could completely relate to what you're saying, because we also went through something similar in our organization where we had to close one of our businesses. So it was not easy, but it's okay. So Emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, emotional transparency is very, very vital. We all know that. Now, what do you think are some of the common barriers leaders face when trying to implement some of the concepts mentioned in this book? How can they overcome these challenges, if at all?
As we get close to closing time, I'm going to use my notes so that I'm very, very sharp with what I'm saying. See, cultivating emotional literacy, so to say. See, you have to distinguish here. We are not talking about emotional intelligence. Huh? We're going further basic. Emotional literacy. First, you have to be emotionally literate, then you become emotionally intelligent. That's the kind of distinction that I'm making here. So, first thing is, it is an ongoing process. So, you can't say that, oh, yes, now I'm emotionally literate, so let me just go on. No, every day brings with it its own little instances or challenges, and you have to deal with it, and it's a continuing process. So that is definitely a challenge. The second thing is, most of the time, we mistake sympathy for empathy. Emotional literacy calls for empathy. And we believe that if we give a shoulder to cry on, that is empathy. No, it may be very, very harmful for the person at the end of it all, because you may be shaming the person, you may be doing anything, whatever. So the difference between empathy and sympathy to be understood, which this book very clearly, I think a whole chapter is devoted to empathy, and that needs to be understood, and that's very well done. The second thing is that we are talking in terms of, values. All of us talk about values. I mean, let's not kid. We all talk about values, but then this book very clearly says, simply mouthing values is not enough. And that is a big barrier, or it's a challenge. You have to practice your values. People have to see you practicing your values. So that is the next challenge that I see when it comes to emotional literacy. And then I would believe that Rajaram would explain, but I'm going to just say the point. In a vulnerability discussion, he said he has had one, so I'm sure he'll be able to elaborate on this. Setting boundaries is very, very important. Otherwise, what happens is that the discussion transcends into something else. It is not actually the building the trust, but then it starts, meandering into something else. So you will have to set boundaries when you're actually having a vulnerability discussion. These, I believe, are really the speed breakers or the barriers going in. Thank you.
Very well put, Subbu. Rajaram, what's your take on the barriers?
As he mentioned, the barriers are pretty much what he said. But I would just go on to the next part of it. How do you overcome that based on what the book says? Living values is something which he gives a very wonderful way of listing out what are your core values. And she gives about 20 odd and then gives a lot of blanks and so you fill. But then she says, question yourself, what is the value that drives you? And you should not have more than 2 defining values out of that. Okay? And as Ram mentioned, Ratan Tata, he put that thing about compassion and what was the other one? Humility. Humility and compassion as the defining values that Ratan Tata lived by. This is what they want to bring it across. When you say values, we must all know the values of the entire team of company leaders and the team members. We should understand each other's core values, and that's an exercise that needs to be done. And then once we decide as a team, as a company, what our core values are, she goes on to describe how do you actually build it into behavior which can be measured. Unless you do that, you will not be living the values. The second thing, she gave a wonderful example which really hit me hard, was the fact that there was one recounting of a case study with the United States Air Force. One of the senior most persons was giving a talk there, and she was doing a briefing session in a very, very busy time. They were all overexhausted with work because they were doing a major exercise. And the lady who's the commander of the base calls and asks, what do you want to say? And they all complain that, can we slow down these operations? We are just exhausted. She then asks one question. And mind you, these are all hardened defense people. She asks one question. How many of you are feeling lonely? And immediately 15 people put up their hands and said, we are feeling lonely. No, the complaint about the pace of work was not related to exhaustion, but the fact that they were lonely. And if you give them time off, they're going to be even more lonely because there is not much of family for them. So you have to address it differently. And then she goes on to explain how they went back to the United States Air Force manual, which was drawn up as a code of conduct from the archives, and they found statements all relating to emotions. There was 120 odd occasions where in that manual it talks about love, talks about honesty, talks about integrity. Whereas the current version is all transactional and it doesn't have any of those words. So they went about changing all that and to recalibrate and see how they can bring in a defense context where it's hierarchy oriented and being strong is one of the most important basic necessities that an officer must demonstrate to his people. Yet, they also feel there is a need to be emotionally connected. And that is one reason why she talks about how do you bring all that you think that is related to emotions into practice is through certain tools and methods which she discusses. And that's what I found very interesting and probably something which we can imbibe. Taking the case of the Tata example, the way there was a famous YouTube session on by a Harvard professor where he discusses the 26/11 attack and what happened. And he goes on to say the hiring policies of Tatas to recruit staff from smaller towns in India, and none of them left their post, even though many died. They ensured that every gust was probably taken care of and brought to safety. Not a single one. And they were not motivated by money. And the second important thing that he oriented and brought as a value system into the Taj Hotel group is the basic training and the basic inculcation that is there in their system is the particular employee of Taj Hotels, his basic duty is defined as being the ambassador of the guest who is coming into Taj and being the ambassador of the guest to the company. So he is supposed to work as an ambassador of the guest who is coming in. That philosophy and the fact that they came from small towns with a lot of ethics and background and relationships are the ones that ensured that none of the staff ever left their post. And it is a remarkable case study that has been done by Harvard professor Deshpande, and you can find it in YouTube. The third thing which resonated with me is a talk by Lieutenant General A. Arun recently, some time back. That's also available in YouTube on leadership. I think he gave it in one of the colleges. And it's about 45 minutes to 55 minutes. He talks about the key aspects of leadership in a crisis. And if you look at that, he again stresses on the esprit de corps and how that has imbibed the culture of being together for everything, how that is imbibed in the armed forces and how that is the differentiator when it comes to fighting a war or being in a crisis situation. The living of the values is something that is very important that we can learn from here. And those are the techniques that she discusses to make sure those barriers are crossed.
Wonderfully put. And yeah, rightly said, you can have values, but you need to live by it. I get reminded of another story which all of you may be familiar with. When Ratan Tata was invited to London to be honored with a knighthood or something, and he refused to go. You know the reason? Because his dog was sick. And he said, that's important to me. Now that defines the value for me. And whenever I went to a Tata company, like how employee felt, even as a visitor, I felt very valued and comfortable. I think that's the culture which value brings, and it goes to show that we have very strong emotional content. in those companies where we are valued. That's my, yeah. Now, I come to two specific questions. Subbu, this is very specific to you because it's about Rotary, where leadership is often built around service and collaboration. How do you see these concepts of vulnerability and courageous leadership aligning with Rotary principles? Can you share how adapting these ideas may influence the leadership, and what is the current reality with Rotary?
Well, good question. First, I would say that it's an organization, it's a voluntary organization, and the moment you have decorated somebody with the Rotary lapel pin, he's same as you. And as long as leadership understands that they are first among equals, and they are first among equals for a defined period, everything would be fine with organizations like Rotary. But unfortunately, in voluntary organizations, that does not happen because there is no other reward except moving up the ladder. And moving up the ladder, unfortunately, in voluntary organizations, especially in India because of our culture, completely depends on psychophancy. There is a lot of psychophancy operating, and I do believe that what is it that could change? First and foremost, leaders should understand that if they are elected, then they are elected for a particular purpose as first among equals and for a particular time. Most of them, by and large, get it, but there are a lot of people who don't get it also. They think that they are the kings for that one particular year and everything that they say needs to go on. This happens in a voluntary organization when you don't understand that your role is custodial rather than leadership in that sense of the word. So that was something that if they read this and understand that the vulnerability aspects and the emotional connect requirement, because the moment you do this, immediately you establish an emotional connect with the team that you pick. They realize that here is a guy who is walking with us. He's not walking ahead, he's not walking behind. He's walking with us. So that's basically what it is, and that is the emotional connect that is required. And then the other thing is that clarity. I mean, lot of leadership. You asked about district leadership. District leadership doesn't being elected as a district leader is not equal to having somebody who is clear. Clarity both in terms of whatever they want to do, plus in terms of talking to their group and then saying that, listen, this is what was needed to be done and you did not do it, and setting the boundaries and all those things. We just say, chalo yaar, 1 year, it will go. Doesn't matter. That kind of a thing, that doesn't work. So you don't really are respected as a leader. You're not looked up as a leader who is willing to show up. There will be messy times. There will be times when things don't happen the way. But then, are you willing to show up? I'll give you an example. For instance, tomorrow is my conference inaugural. This is a real story. I have invited the judge from the High Court as the chief guest. We are having the international representative already present, and a party is going on in a big hotel. 9 o'clock at night, I receive a call from the person who arranged for the guest to come. Invitations have been printed, etc. I'm not giving the name of the person. Now, Ram Subramaniam, there's no reason why I should not. Justice Ram Subramaniam was he has called and told that he cannot come tomorrow. My chief guest is not going to be there at the inaugural of the conference. Now, why? The Chief Justice has called for a meeting. There was this law college problem, if you remember. And 10:30 was the inaugural, 10:30 the meeting for all the judges with the Chief Justice. Finished. He just cannot be without attending that, so he has excused himself. At 9:30 at night, where do I go for a chief guest? For my district conference, which is the most important activity of my year. It is a mess. Absolute mess. And I'm sitting here in the lobby of a hotel thinking what to do. And the first thing that I had to do was to call. I just made a call to somebody whom I trust. And I said, hey, listen, this is what it is. I am in a soup. What is it that can be done? I don't know how it happened. He just, hold on, I'll give the phone to a person whom you know very well. And you ask, he will not refuse. And he gave the phone to the Chief Secretary of Tamil Nadu. They were sitting down and they were having a drink. He gives the phone to the Chief Secretary and then he knows me. And I said, sir, this is a problem. When do you want me there? 10:30. I'll be there, don't worry. Sir, thank you. Don't thank me, man. 10:30 tomorrow I'll be there at Chennai Trade Center. And that marked the end of it. But then you had to, you have to jump into that message. I could have been completely stumped. And I wouldn't have known what to do and then try to carry on the conference without a chief guest. But then because I was willing to expose my vulnerability to somebody, and it so happened, yes, serendipity maybe it just happened that I had to get somebody with an entire press entourage, with an entire press coverage of all these things, which wouldn't have happened if the judge had come. This man came and then the whole thing happened. What I'm trying to say is in Rotary, we can get into messy situations and, taking your team into confidence. There are other things that I don't want to say, but then the fact of the matter is, yes, this was one which I can expose on a table. Otherwise, yes, I've had situations when the entire conference team resigned, saying that they wouldn't work with the conference chair. 1 week before the conference. But how we sorted that out was some way, different way, but it happens. In Rotary, in a voluntary, let's not just talk Rotary. In a voluntary organization where nobody pays anybody to do anything, these kind of things can happen. And here is where one needs to be very, very clear in terms of where we stand and where our leadership stands and starts and stops. That's very important. Thank you.
That was really, you didn't stop with that news getting shocked. You went ahead and sought help with somebody and you got a better result. I think that's a great example. Now this one is very specific to Rajaram, being from a highly regulated and risk-averse insurance industry. How do you think Brene Brown's emphasis on vulnerability and leading with courage can be applied, especially when leaders are expected to minimize risk? How do these concepts enhance leadership effectiveness in such a structured organization? Does it work?
Ram, one thing I will say, insurance as a subject, because it deals with risk, and you think insurance companies are risk averse, it's the contrary. We are the biggest risk takers. Our job is in living in ambiguity and predicting possibilities and ensuring that we minimize the potential impact, negative impact by way of financially modeling. This is the essence of insurance. So basically, an underwriter is one who will never hesitate to jump out of an aircraft. He will only ensure that he has a parachute and an emergency parachute. So we are clearly the best place to try out all these things. In that industry is where we always try out all these things. Because it's in the realm of propensity, it's the realm of predictions, it's the realm of large numbers providing you the capability to predict, and then trying to technically understand what is the risk that is coming into the pool, adjusting for it and putting it in the right commercial context. So overall, if you see, vulnerability and ensuring that risk is managed comes naturally to this industry. Having said that, the way the organizations kind of work, the larger ones especially, they become siloed because of the scale and the size of operations. That's where it becomes a little bit complex in terms of managing this kind of conversations, in terms of how do you motivate. One of the most difficult products to sell is an insurance contract. You are basically selling promises, and in life insurance, the promise is to be done after your time, right? So selling that is the most difficult thing. And they are the most misunderstood people. If you see an insurance agent, you tend to walk away because he'll try to sell, or he will have difficult conversations about your mortality. We tend to keep that aside and think everything is certain, tomorrow I'll wake up alive. It's not true, but we tend to live in that fantasy. When somebody comes and punctures that fantasy and says, no, there's a lot of ambiguity, and puts fear into you about your mortality and all that, you tend to stay away from those guys. How do you motivate them? Looking at them, the society looks at them a little bit lower than a normal salesman who's selling an iPhone. He's probably welcomed, whereas this guy is told to stay away. Right? So how do you motivate them? How do you understand their feelings? Because their ego gets trampled every day in every meeting. And somewhere when they come back to the office, if the sales head also pulls them up and says, you have not done your enough number of cases, you don't do this, you don't do that, what is the motivation he'll have? He will go and reflect that in his household also. Then the family also will be unhappy. So there is this element where there's a strong case for having an empathy-based approach. Sympathy cannot be there. There's a lot of distinction between the two, but an empathic-based approach and ensuring that they have the clarity, which he mentioned, as a person in the society, what is their work and what is the worth of an insurance. If that insurance agent is imbibed it fully, then he won't mind whether somebody is talking to him or running away from him, because he knows Karmanyeva Adhikarisya is real for him. So that's where I would say, in an insurance context, concepts related to this are more of a natural fit, because it's not a risk-averse organization, it's a risk-managing organization.
So we have come to the end of this discussion. One final message to the future leaders. In one sentence, some essence of...
One sentence each, yes. Thank you. We have to understand that in this growing context of India, these concepts are very, very important. We are a multicultural, multi-language society, and a huge amount of the people who are going to deliver are coming from outside the cities and exposed to different kind of things. So you go and start talking about emotional literacy, this, that, and the other to them, and they have already started working. It doesn't matter. The guy is making a life for himself. At that point in time, for us leaders or whoever wants to be a leader, you have to make a distinction. You will hear what is being said, but if you don't make the effort to understand what he is trying to say, you will make a mistake. Simply because a person in the Indian context never says what exactly he wants. He says something, but if you just take that at face value like you would do in the West, you will be making a mistake and the emotional connect will be lost. If you try to understand what he's trying to say and then take it out from him, then it will succeed. We are a huge nation and we are multicultural, but we are also a nation which has got a phenomenal amount of native wisdom. Let's not forget about the native wisdom that is available. Let's pull it out. Emotional literacy and whatever that is said in the book will pull that out and give us a head start in anything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will put it very simply. For future leaders, be real, be genuine, be grounded. That's all.
Okay, that is authentic. Thank you. Thank you for that. So now we come to the questions from the audience. Is there anybody who wants to ask a question before I go to the online? Yeah. I will repeat your question. Okay.
Sir, as I understand, Brown seems to have focused on the emotional issues. How about the spiritual issues? Because management as a concept has come a long way from IQ to EQ and then to SQ. Then, second question, individual values and the organizational values. Because a team will have several members, core team will have several members. and any core team member will have more members under him. How can the individual values and the organizational values brought together for the success of the team? Then the courage to fail, it requires experimentation in any organization. How often such experimentation and in what context the experimentation is supposed to take place?
Very short answer, so I can do that. You're talking about spiritualism, right? She writes, she says, I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. So, what I'm trying to say is, she makes the distinction, whether we make it or not. But she says that she's very spiritual. So I believe a lot of what she has written is based on the spiritualism that she has got. It's not that it is distinct from it, it is removed from it. I believe it is also part of the spiritualism, and that is the reason why it resonates a lot with a lot of values that we have in India and the way we do things in India, whether in the family or in the business, etc., as opposed to what we do in the West. So spiritualism is not excluded from this. I would request Rajaram to answer the other question that he has asked. Yeah.
So your other question is about how do you align individual values with the organizational values. The way she goes about, she offers two methods to it. One, she says that encourage each one of them to come out with their core values, which defines how they react and how they work and how they respond. And then collectively debate on it and agree on what should be the organization's values. The second approach is to clearly articulate with clarity what the organization's aim is or the purpose of an organization. Even before a strategy is developed for an organization, the first step is purpose. Define the purpose of the organization. Based on that purpose of the organization, what kind of values will be necessary for fulfilling that purpose in its completeness, in its what she calls as wholeheartedness way of looking at things. From there you derive that these are the values that we hold dear, and then have what they call in the jargon that she uses very often is a rumble, a meeting where people freely expose and debate, and they take time and iterate it several times before they finally agree on to it. And those conversations have to be very open. So each one gives their view or their perspective, and she says as a leader, you should be non-judgmental, do not put your bias and say this is what I think the values should be. Let each one relate and come back with their perspectives, be non-judgmental, hear them out, then debate in a very open manner, willing to listen and come back with a consensus. That is sustainable. That kind of organization becomes more agile, becomes more productive, and becomes more efficient. As per research, that is what she says. So that's how they do the alignment between the individual and the enterprise. And the other question that you had, sir, was courage to fail and experiment. Then she talks about that. The key to that is having the sense of curiosity. It is only when you have the curiosity to not be satisfied with the status quo, you will be able to discover new things and new ways. And she quotes a lot of examples and case studies that have been done and how they have applied this principle of encouraging curiosity as the very basic value that will drive innovation. And when you have curiosity and driving innovation, when something fails, it doesn't disturb the leadership because they are already prepared themselves to say that it can fail, and we are ambiguous. We don't know whether it will succeed or not, but let's try it together. We are in it together. We will make changes as we go along. Innovation happens only when that sense of curiosity and acceptance of a diversity happens. She says, if you bring in all similar kind of people as the leader, you are only building echo chamber. So you have to build diverse talents into your organization, give them a free flow of ideas, encourage that, and be non-judgmental and accept all the perspectives, collectively debate, be open about it, and agree, and finally come out with some clear aspects of how you want to go ahead. And that is how you build a very innovation-based organization. But there again, as he rightly pointed out, she also gives a lot of stress on boundaries. How do you define those boundaries? And within those boundaries, how do you focus and create creativity? I hope I answered your question, sir.
That's a comprehensive answer to the question. Okay, now I'm going to the first question from the audience, the online audience. This is to PDG Subbu. Why PDG? Because it's from a Rotarian. I think Raja from Namakkal. As a Rotary leader, how do you encourage open dialogue and trust building in community-based projects?
Open dialogue and trust building. I am assuming that it is going to be open dialogue and trust building between the community and Rotary. Can I make that assumption?
Yeah.
Okay. If I make that assumption, it's actually very easy. Say it exactly as it is. Now, don't say anything that is different from the absolute truth. Because what happens is there is truth and absolute truth. Most times we tend to say the truth, but we don't tell the absolute truth. Now, if you want the community to trust you, you have to understand that it's a very diverse set of people. So it is better to stick to the absolute truth and nothing but the absolute truth when it comes to a project. If you have problems, if you don't know, if you have to get permissions, and if you don't know whether all that is going to happen, don't make grandiose announcements. What will happen is every time you make an announcement and it does not happen, there will be a little bit of erosion of the trust. Whereas if you say, yes, we are here, these things need to be done. Once these are done, this is where we will, and we will keep you posted. We don't even know whether it will happen or not happen because other agencies are involved. Typical of what this book says. Don't be scared. Fear and courage go hand in hand. That's a fundamental premise of this book. Sachin Tendulkar, when he goes to bat first, last time we went into bat, he had butterflies in his stomach before he faced his first ball. It is there, but then you go and present yourself. Same thing with Rotary. If you want to talk to the, so to say, your community, better to be open, straightforward, total truth as it is on the face of it. We are doing a project for the community, for the sake of the community. So there's no reason for us to take anything more than what we are doing. That's what it is.
Okay, I think that's
I've answered the question.
Clear enough, I think. Okay. Now this is to Mr. Rajaram. With your experience in international business and trade, how do you manage cross-cultural challenges while staying authentic to your leadership style? This is from Bhaskar from Chennai.
This is something every MNC corporate executive is facing today. And since geography is removed out of the equation, so the distance doesn't matter, you still need to manage different cultures and different perceptions. The first thing that helped me, and of course I was also trained in those aspects in my corporate career, the first thing that they always say is, before you speak, listen. And when you listen to what is said and what is left unsaid. And you also observe and understand a little bit based off the perspective that they are coming from, the cultural background that they are coming from. In a cross-functional, cross-cultural team, somebody might be coming from Japan. There are 3 barriers that person has to face. One is the language barrier. Second is the Japanese way of articulating a point of view is never direct. It's always slightly winded, and they give you signals which you need to interpret. So you need to understand there are certain things which is very intrinsic to Japanese society, like the concept of face. Whereas when you have a German in a team or a British person or an American, it's very direct. And you don't have to worry too much. in terms of understanding any other meaning other than what has been communicated. They tend to be very transactional. Here it tends to be more relational. So you need, when you're having a task on hand and you're creating a team, you ensure that the right skill sets are identified, but as the team leader, you need to ensure that you are the point of contact for them to give the assurance and confidence. So that comes when you listen, the spoken word and the unspoken word, and you also observe and understand the cultural differences that comes in. That's number one. Number two, when you are in a cross-cultural team, it also helps if you clearly define to each one of them that when you are working in a cross-cultural team, everybody is expected to adopt the rules of that team for that occasion, which is framed by us as leaders and communicated with the reason why those rules are in place. And you encourage the observance of those rules for that particular set period of time. So it might pull these people out of their comfort zones, but they know that is the expectation, and they will also make a change to ensure that they are cognizant of each other's cultural preferences and the way articulation of their views have to be done. You frame that correctly, you set the context first up. Third, as much as possible, you ensure that you provide the input on how to deal with cross-cultural teams to the other team members. When you feel that you need to give an advice that when you're talking to a Japanese, please look out for these things or don't do these things. As a team leader, you are supposed to provide that guidance. So cultural sensitivity is there, must be there with you, and also you should ensure that it is percolated to all the teams. With these three, I think we can manage.
Thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of the session. Thank you very much, Subbu and Rajaram, for sharing your insights. And thank you, audience, for being patient with us. I hope you enjoyed the session. And those online who are viewing this program, thank you again. Some of the questions could not be asked for paucity of time, but we will revert to you for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Ram. We have about more than 260 viewers online today on various channels. Thanks all of you for taking your time off. Special thanks to all those who are here this evening. And the panel, led by Mr. Ram, has done a fabulous job. Fantastic book. Let's give them a big round of applause. And the program, as he said, was supposed to be slated on 16th. So they read the book once and they had to read it again for having 15 days. The exam has got postponed, so they had to revise it again. That's what the speakers were saying. So it is more than dare to lead, it is actually dare to read. That's what they did this time. Let's request them to come forward and accept a token of appreciation. Joining me is our committee member, Mr. Ramesh Babu.
Thank you very much.
This is an MMA published book. So, Mr. Please come. The book is called for MMA, selecting 21 best articles in the last 10 years.